Well, without further ado, my guest today on Quick to Politic, welcome everyone everybody who's out there listening in cyberspace via the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube. Welcome to Quick to Politic, the social commentary talk show. I'm your host, Ernestine Lyons, and I am an advocate, I am an activist, and I am a councilwoman in the city of Harper Woods. And I love having conversations with fellow politically minded people on, just finding solutions to contemporary issues. And today's episode is a special episode on how to win an election with the Mariah Phelps. All right, so I'm just going to introduce Mariah because she is a rock star, whiz kid, and an overall amazing person with wonderful beach wave hair in the middle of like October. I don't know where she got all this from, but so she is an experienced political consultant from Kalamazoo, and for years Mariah has been a trailblazer in the political arena, and you may know her experience from managing campaigns at the congressional level, from the state level, countywide, local levels. She's a lifelong public servant and has had such distinctions as the Michigan Political Leadership Fellowship. She's also received the Michael Dively Endowment for Leadership and Service, and she has also worked she's had fellowships and Women in Public Service Awards and the Presidential Volunteer Service Award. She got her bachelor's degree in public service from Albion College and her master's degree in international relations. What? I didn't know that. All right. From the University of Chicago. In her spare time, Mariah enjoys recruiting and mentoring new candidates for public office. And I didn't ever read that last line ahead of time, and I really expected it to say enjoys rollerblading or something active, something fun, and it's like your enjoyment time is work. I feel like
there's always more work to do.
Right. We're cut from the same cloth, so like I feel like my hobby is this political podcast. So, all right. So, okay, we're going to share with people out there how to win an election, because we are talking to the person who is going to get everybody elected. And what is your track record? How many folks, have won campaigns that you have run?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the current campaign that I'm working on is my 6th campaign. And I have managed with this one, when we win, I've managed the last 3 and I've won the last 3, so in terms of staffing and internships and all that, I've done a ton of stuff, but in terms of actual management and W's that I've gotten under my belt, in 12 days, I'm going to have the last 3 for 3. And that is huge. I'm really, really looking forward to that, not just because of what that means for me professionally, but because of what that means for my community and what that means for the future of the Southwest Michigan area. I think it's all about, moving that needle a little bit at a time. So I bounce around from, I've moved from working on campaigns in Jackson and Battle Creek and Albion and the middle of nowhere and Kalamazoo. And it's really about doing the work across the board until we see some progressively better changes for the future.
Awesome. And, speaking of progressive changes, women have known to be, those leaders for progressive values. Like, we want to be able to control our bodies. We want to be able to not have, who we want to marry dictated to us. And so, how many of those, candidates you've helped, get to where they are and these W's, how many of them have actually been women?
Yeah, so right now I work for 2 amazing women candidates who are going to change the world, or at least they're a small part of it. 5 of the 6 campaigns I've worked on have been strong women candidates. I've only ever worked on 1 male candidate campaign.
All right. That is awesome. So I'm just going to jump right into one of our first questions is, what is it like kind of, that was just kind of my off the top of my head, like, yeah, I really want to know. But social media strategies for folks who, don't normally utilize social media. And I think we've seen a lot of the grassroots level elections in the past maybe 10 years that didn't necessarily need these kind of, strategies, but how has that landscape changed things? And, what is it like utilizing, like, what are some of your tips for like making sure that people are utilizing social media the right way to really galvanize support for a candidate running for, office on whatever level?
Yeah. So there's three big rules that I tell any candidate I work with or any campaign I work with in terms of social media. It's be present, be authentic, and don't be boring, right? Anything you can post that's interesting, whether it's your own words, whether it's a retweet or a shared story from a friend in a position similar to the one you want, whatever it is, be interesting and use a voice that is your own. So, I mean, some of these characters on social media, right, they've got these really big personalities and it shows through social media. And sometimes when you're working with a 65-year-old candidate from up north who just got an Instagram for the first time ever for the campaign, like you can't necessarily translate that voice that you're hearing to your own. And so voters on social media know that if it's not an authentic voice of yours, they're going to sense it right away. So if your passion is zoning or your passion is gardening, whatever it is, and you like to tell stories or you like to tell bad jokes, like you have to work that into your social media presence because it's going to go noticed if you leave it out and people know you. Winning campaigns is all about consistency and saturation. And so your personality needs to come through, not just on the doors, not just in mail, not just on TV, but also in your social media. And you can't change, you can't change your tone. You can't change who you are, what you think is funny, right?
Right. If you're a dad jokes kind of candidate and there are no dad jokes and they're only like social justice memes and things like that, then, I feel like that's something that's just like, oh, okay, well,
That's exactly it.
This isn't why I fell in love with the candidate in the first place, or maybe potentially could grow to like them because of some record that they had before.
Right. And I mean, like, everyone has a base too, right? So your friends and family and the first people who you find are your supporters, like they fell for you as a candidate for a reason. Don't abandon them. You want to grow with them and bring them into the folds even more and make them even more invested in your candidacy. And you don't do that by changing what originally won you their support.
Trying to unmute myself to agree with you, and I'm just like, yes, yes. That kind of leads into, just talking about planning and, so how do you organize, plan, and prioritize like the work of a campaign, the actual work? Social media is one thing, but, the pounding the pavement, the going in and knocking the doors, and, depending on how big the seat is, if you're running for, a state rep, state senate, that's a lot to organize. So how does one little you organize, this much coverage, and kind of what are some tips on your strategy?
Yeah. So the first step I always take is you have to identify the candidate's commitment, right? And, more commitment, less commitment, whatever it is fine. But we have to know up front how many hours is the candidate able and willing to put into this campaign in terms of raising money, knocking doors, talking to important leaders in the community, that kind of stuff. Because if there's not a consensus on that amount of time, everything from there is going to fall apart. From there, if you don't have enough time invested from the candidate, that's all right. You got to get more volunteers. You just know you have to set yourself up for more success when it comes to volunteer recruitment. And then making sure when you set those expectations, you actually stick to them. So there has to be accountability. That's what people like me do, right? Is they get on their candidates every day and they say, you said you were going to knock for 8 hours today. You are at 4 hours. The sun is still up. You need to go out and knock doors. And then, so it's about sticking to your plan, making a plan and then sticking to it, having someone to hold you accountable. And, at the end of the day, if you don't have the hours you need to talk to the voters you need to talk to, you're going to have to make some cuts in terms of priorities. You likely will not be able to talk to every voter in your district. Not very feasible. So having good lists, having, some structure to which voters you're talking to that week or that day, that's going to help you a lot. You can't just say, I want to talk to an entire county and just start alphabetizing the list. It's not going to happen that way.
Right, right. And I was able to, I'm just holding my cell phone up and going live that way. So,
Sure.
hello viewers out there. We have Mariah Phelps who is talking to us about how to win an election, which is timely because we have technically tomorrow's Friday, so 1 week until the election. So, how are you feeling like right now? Are you like a ball of nerves, or are you, feeling optimistic or hopeful? And, what are some of the thoughts on, how you expect outcomes to really, just kind of get, especially for progressives like us. What are you expecting, and what are you hoping to see?
Well, so just for a little bit of context, I live in a pretty purple county. We've got a couple of cities in our county that are either really blue or leaning blue, but the out county areas are pretty red. So we overall are pretty purple. And this year, I am really expecting some seriously big wins in Kalamazoo County. I really do believe that systemic change starts at the most local level of government. And that's why I like to work on lower level and down ballot races. I think Joe Biden, love him, hate him, whatever, I think he's going to win big in this county. And that's going to mean a lot for the residents who pay taxes here, who get their vital services here, who, have dangerous levels of pollution here. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out. I don't think we've ever been considered a blue county. And I'm really excited to see us show the state of Michigan and show the country that we can be a blue county. In terms of how I'm feeling, optimistic, like there's not enough daylight
Oh
in
my
the
God.
day. It's the week before GOTV, and it's always the worst week in my opinion because you're busy planning for what you need to do, but there's not actually a ton outside of that to do. So it's a lot of like, all right, well, I hope we have this universe right. And I hope, we have enough people who turn their absentee ballots in early, and I hope all these things. So nervous, yes. Excited, yes. Optimistic, yes.
Okay. So, and I'm glad you touched on the point, because at this point it's like, okay, mail-in ballots should have already gone out, and technically the 21st was the last day to send it. And now it's just like you either show up at the polls, or you just kind of, all right, you sit back, and then you keep campaigning, you keep pushing. But I kind of want to talk about endorsements and name recognition. How important is that to a campaign? Because, they say don't run unless you have a chance to win. And then sometimes running repeatedly can be, not so much of a sound strategy. So what's the right strategy for, getting your name out there, and for really having that kind of recognition, and getting that sort of sense of, I want people to know who I am before I even, start to go out there and put all this money and energy into, something that, may or may not pan out. So what are your thoughts on just those elements of a campaign?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I want to preface it by saying, women candidates and candidates of color and minority candidates in particular, they are always the last to run, right? They're always the last ones to think I deserve to have this seat. So everything I say, keep that in mind. And one of the biggest things is like endorsements. I don't really think endorsements matter myself. Now, in terms of name recognition, they matter, because if the person who or the group who has endorsed you has a big network, that means they can send out to their markets and their networks to promote you. That's very helpful. I was talking to a friend a couple weeks ago, and he said that, I forget what the number was, but women candidates are significantly less likely to run for office again after they've lost, whereas male candidates tend to have no problem doing that. And that's why male candidates in part tend to win more, is because they're willing to put themselves back out there. So while I don't think running for office over and over and over again is a great strategy, you know, you do have to try again. Like I tell everyone, like, maybe not this time. There's always the case of right candidate, wrong cycle, right? And, you know, maybe you were running against an incumbent who just, who's going to retire in 2 years. Maybe, you know, there hadn't been that water crisis in your community yet. Or maybe this document hadn't been leaked about the person in office that disclosed a lot of really important information. So, you know, you have to, as a candidate, know when the time is right to declare. And there's the difference between actually when you declare your intent to run and when you as a candidate know I'm building for something. So before you even announce your candidacy, you need to get out into your community. You need to talk to people. You need to make sure that you aren't starting that name recognition component from zero. If your local coffee shop person doesn't know your name or doesn't recognize your face, maybe you need to do a little bit more base building and groundwork before you're ready to announce your candidacy.
Right, right. And so, you know, you hit on a really important point about, you know, just kind of building a name for yourself, you know, prior to, you know, kind of throwing your hat into the ring. And I kind of want to ask about, you know, just how long have you been, you know, doing this whole campaign thing and making sure that, you know, your candidates that you're passionate about. Remind me again, how many years or how long?
So I've been doing it since 2015. But in that time, I mean, there's been years where I've worked on 3 campaigns at once. Right now I'm a campaign manager for 2 separate campaigns and doing some kind of pro bono work for local candidates in my area. So I've certainly got a lot of saturation over those last 5 years, which is great because every campaign is different.
Right, which is why I brought up this point, because this is a pandemic year and, you know, this is definitely different. So
Yeah.
what has it been like campaigning during, you know, a pandemic? And, you know, did you have to rely on more social media? Did you have to overcome any of, you know, these kind of challenges to, you know, people not wanting to come to doors and, you know, maybe still knocking doors, but, you know, maybe in the very beginning, people were being apprehensive. But I think now at this point, you know, there's nobody who's just like, oh my gosh, coronavirus, stay away. So what are some of the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome, you know, campaigning during a pandemic, and what stayed the same, you know,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
time
So
around?
I guess, I mean, obviously there's the kind of this, the taboo of canvassing during, not even just canvassing, but the taboo of knocking on doors, the taboo of asking for money when we are in a social and economic crisis, and public health crisis, right? So that certainly made a lot of candidates really nervous at first. It quickly became apparent to me and candidates across the state and probably the country, however, that um, people are more eager than ever to give their time and to give their money to candidates they believe in. And so what that has done is made messaging and contact exponentially more important, because in this time of what seems like a lot of darkness, voters are looking for someone to lead. Voters are realizing who is in our state house matters. Who is in my local council chamber matters. Who is in the White House matters. And, you know, I tell people all the time, like, I don't get anywhere less than like a 30 to 45% contact rate on the doors, which is unheard of, right? Normally contact rates are like 15 to 20%, but because people are home, because they are hungry for information, because they don't feel like they're getting the correct information from our leadership that's in office right now,
Mhm.
they want to hear from us. And that's very different than, you know, standard years where, you know, you get the doors shut in your face occasionally. And I think of it in the context of things are really bad right now, but if we don't do absolutely everything we can right now and for the next 12 days, things are going to get a lot worse for a lot more people. And I just I don't think, and the voters that I talk to seem to agree with me, I don't think we have a choice but to get out there and do the campaign work.
Right, right. And it's like you're almost like a source of light and a beacon of information during these times where people do feel like, okay, I'm in the dark and these are
Yeah.
dark times and I really want to talk to people. And maybe they're more willing. Would you say that now they've become more willing to just kind of like, no, I've been so isolated. I do want to talk to somebody. And, I do want to kind of have more conversations and sort of that kind of deep canvassing style of like, let's really talk about the issues. Would you say
Yeah,
that?
I would definitely say that, and I would definitely say that those conversations are even better now because these people are at home with their thoughts and they're seeing direct linkages between who's in office and how it affects them in their daily lives, which is so often the problem with politics is people don't see how it affects them.
Mhm.
But that can't be said this year. Everyone knows how government and politics is shaping their day-to-day lives, and they want to talk about it, and they want to let me know whether they support my candidates or not. They want to tell me exactly what they think, and that is great because it means more people are engaged with what is going to happen this year.
All right, right. I'm actually glad to hear that because I have been out, kind of knocking doors and supporting local candidates and a few other friends of mine who've run for office during the primaries that maybe they weren't as successful, but it was still kind of interesting to be able to be out there and get a feel for what people are looking for. And I know when I ran for office for city council, there wasn't as much reception. People didn't really want to talk. So I think there is a slight difference, and I'm just kind of like wondering what somebody who's been doing this for a long time, kind of feels about, the difference between, pandemic life and non-pandemic life campaigning. Um, so, okay, you kind of talked a little earlier about like women campaigning, and then also like minorities kind of having this reticence, this sense of, you know what, I don't deserve it yet, or I'm not ready. And I feel like women, we always have this imposter syndrome where we're like, I need one more degree before I can run for that. And I need this and I'm not ready. And, whereas a guy will just be like, yeah, I once saw a film on that, so I'm an expert and I'm going to be the mayor or whatever the case. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So in your kind of estimation, what do you think, how do you decide who to cultivate? And you say in your spare time you like to mentor new candidates. How much coaxing does it take to really get them to step up and really step into that leadership that you see in them, and that position you feel that they naturally would fit into? So how do you mentor and convince leaders to step up? Because I know that they did say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, somebody found her and told her to run for office. It wasn't like she's like, I've always wanted to run for office, and someone mentored her. And so what has that journey been like for you and mentoring your, leaders?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first step, right, is, I mean, people have to be asked. Man, woman, black, white, whatever identity you have, data shows that people don't run for office if they are not asked to. So for anyone watching right now or anyone watching later, I am asking you, please, we need you to run for office if
You
you're
hear
watching.
that? Run.
We need you to run for office. Okay. So that's the biggest hurdle. People need to be asked. And the thing on top of that is not just asking, but following up and showing that you are part of either a system or a party or a cohort of some kind that is going to be supportive, because no one wants to run on their own. Campaigns are not about one person. That's why we have committees to elect these people or friends of this person. It's not about the candidate's name. It is about the movement and the ideology behind that person. And they are there or will be there to represent the values of everyone who is on that campaign and who's on that team. So showing that you are going to have some follow through. If you ask someone to run, you better show up for them if they have a question. You better ask them a second time. Hey, the filing deadline's coming up. I see you haven't filed your candidacy. What's up with that? Do you need help? or are you having second thoughts? I really believe in you. I'm happy to answer any questions. And since I just asked you, I would love to put myself out there and say, please, message me, ask me your questions, tell me your concerns. I'm happy to help. But in terms of, I don't think it takes a lot of coaxing. That's not really the word I would use, but I think it takes some commitment. And you can't just recruit and train candidates if you're not committed to the bigger vision of moving the needle and building the bench. We call it building the bench. So you can't have someone run for president one day if they never ran for city commission, right? If they never got involved in their neighborhood association, if they never ran for precinct delegate. So you have to start somewhere, and we build up people's confidence in layers over time, giving them more and more responsibility progressively so that one day we can look to them to be the future of our city, our country, our state, wherever.
All right. I love it. I love it. That is a good high note to end on. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of Quick to Politic. And for those of you out there watching, Mariah and I are a part of the Michigan Political Leadership Fellowship, where we bring together bright minds across the aisles. And, we get together and we talk about politics, and we learn about, Michigan and leadership. And we become those cultivated leaders that are then ready to, step into the fore and really be, a force for good and a force for change. So any words of wisdom for the candidates that are out there running for office, and the candidates who maybe have run in the past or run in the primaries, and what advice would you give to them on one, not giving up, and two, making it successful the next go round?
Well, the first thing I'll say to anyone who's still running for this general election, I know you're tired. I'm out here. I'm about to go knock 10 more doors before it's 8 o'clock and I'm cut off. I know you're exhausted. I know it's almost the end, but you got to keep pushing. This last week and a half is the most important part of any campaign. And, it's not just whatever district you're running for that needs you to work your butt off for the next week and a half. It's our entire state. It's our entire country. It's the children looking up to you who are not yet running for office. We all need you to keep going. And that's the only thing that's going to make us win big. If you're not running for office right now, or if you've lost an election recently, get up, try again, evaluate your campaign. Where did you do well? Where did you do poorly? Look at it critically and say, how are you going to do better? And when is the next time you can file to run again?
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out. And then, now you're going to get back out there and knocking those doors. And, thank you for those of you who joined us out there as I hold my phone up to my computer screen because I couldn't go live for the second week in a row. But thank you so much for joining us out there also in podcast world and watching on YouTube. So thank you so much, Mariah. And I guess I'll see you next month virtually with our fellowship. And good luck to you and your candidates, and, just stay awesome.
Thank you so much, Ernestine. I loved it. I had a great time. Thanks for doing all this. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I am